Welcome to World Affairs Today, brought to you by the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C., a leading forum for global education and international affairs.
My name is Tony Kelly Foster. I have the honor of being President and CEO of the World Affairs Council, D.C. On behalf of the Council, I would like to welcome each of you to this Author Series program and thank you for your personal support of our cause. We also want to thank our strategic partner, the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center, for the use of this beautiful Horizon Ballroom for all of our public programs. Council's programs are filmed for tape-delayed broadcast on our weekly television show, World Affairs Today, which airs Sundays at 3 p.m. on MHC Worldview, the national channel of MHC Networks. After broadcast nationwide to 28 million homes on a cable network, our programs are available globally on our YouTube channel, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms. This evening, we are pleased to welcome a nationally respected educator, pollster, author, media contributor, and my friend, the inimitable John Zogby. He is here tonight to discuss his new book, We Are Many, We Are One, Neo-Tribes and Tribal Analytics in the 21st Century America. Background. With the new administration, America's domestic and foreign policies and priorities are also fundamentally changing direction. Hands up all who've noticed the change of direction. We believe in the First Amendment in here. It's okay to put your hand up in this room. Organizations are also starting to reevaluate their means of data collection on the demographics of the American public. New trends can have significant impacts on both U.S. and international policy and priorities. What are they? How have we changed? What policy do these changes speak to? This evening, John Zogby will attempt to answer these questions through his revolutionary way of analyzing the different subsets of American people. Traditionally, Americans use census and polling data to group people in terms of metrics such as race, gender, religion, occupation, geographic location, and education, etc. John Zogby has devised a new process for grouping Americans together. He calls these groups neo-tribes. Rather than groupings being based on demographics, they are a form of self-identification, arranged by perceived similarities and differences in lifestyle, philosophies, and passion. Tonight, he will discuss these 11 self-formed American neo-tribes in an attempt to better understand the United States population and its characteristics through non-statistical means. He advocates this new process of data processing at a time of profound change in the U.S. and its relationship with the global community. And now to John Zogby. John Zogby is the creator of the Zogby Poll, founder of John Zogby Strategies, and the owner and CEO of Zogby Analytics. He's also my longtime personal friend, whom I hold in the highest personal and professional esteem. It was my honor to involve John a number of years ago in a DIVA program, a Distinguished International Visitors Address program, a lecture series that I had the opportunity to develop as a visiting professor in communications at the University of Ulster, Northern Ireland, and Ireland's largest higher education organization. It involved world-class practitioners in multiple communications disciplines who were international best practice exemplars in their chosen professional sectors. John Zogby proved to be a rock star in the Diva program. You think you've seen Strictly Come Dancing? Wait for later tonight. He also won the whiskey tasting competition at the world's oldest licensed whiskey distillery in Bushmills, Northern Ireland, that got its royal charter in 1608. There's the man. John is also a senior advisor at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and the inaugural director of the Keenan Center for Entrepreneurship at Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York. John's a recognized standout innovator in his global work as a public opinion pollster, who in part gained his international professional reputation in this market sector after accurately predicting the outcome of 5 consecutive US presidential elections since 1996. However, the last Zogby poll in the 2016 presidential election placed Democrat Hillary Clinton as having a 2-point lead over candidate Donald Trump, which John will always say was within the standard statistical margin of error. For over 30 years, John Zogby has led successful, innovative, and visionary communications, marketing, and operations projects for corporations, businesses, governments, nonprofits, trade associations, and educational institutions. Zogby Poll and Zogby Analytics serves clients including Reuters, NBC News, MSNBC, The New York Post, Fox News, BBC, CBC, and ABC Australia. With that, please join me in welcoming my friend, a man for all seasons, the one, the only, John Zogby.
Boy, someday I wish I get to introduce you. What a good friend and scholar and wonderful guy, and you couldn't possibly have a better CEO here at the World Affairs Council, and I mean that, Tony. You're such a good friend. I mean, what you've done for me alone, everywhere I go. Oh, I've heard of you. You're the one that Tony Cully Foster introduces, aren't you? Yeah. All right. There's a lot of questions, big questions. You know, what happened in the last election? What happened to the polls? What's happening to the United States of America? What's happening in the world? Are we at war? Are we headed towards a bigger war? Big questions. And I ask them. But tonight, I'm going to try to give you some answers. Now, I know in the Q&A period, you're going to ask me some of those big questions, and I'm prepared to deal with North Korea and Syria and Trump. That's not like one of those SAT questions, you know, which of the following doesn't belong in this group. But you'll go far laughing at my jokes. You will just go far in life, okay? However, what I want to do is provide bigger answers. And the biggest answer of all is just who are we anymore as a nation? Who are we as individuals? And you know, I've spent a lifetime dealing with demographics. It's been 4 decades now. And I'm a great believer. You know, I've helped define the global generation of millennials. I've written extensively about all of the various age cohorts, as well as Walmart shoppers and NASCAR fans and every which way you can cut and slice the American people. But in 2009, my company and associates, and then eventually my sons and my son Ben, one of my business partners in John Zogby Strategies, the other business partner is one of my other sons, Jeremy Zogby. We've been working extensively on this notion of neo-tribes. And as you'll see in a moment, it is a way to refine who we are by virtue of our values and our aspirations and our behaviors and what we look to and for and from other people. But at the same time that we're talking about neo-tribes, and there are 11 of them, and we have a process for capturing emerging tribes, because that's the kind of world that we live in. Things are so dynamic and changing, that even though there are these individual tribes, what we have discovered, and as you'll see, what I call tribal border crossings, that every one of those tribes in some way, shape, or form intersect with each other. There are common denominators that they share. And as we'll see, that's the question of leadership. Not dividing the tribes and speaking to them individually as separate silos and compartments, but how do we, on the basis of finding those common denominators, how do we build bridges? And so, let's begin. That's a nice logo, incidentally. All right, so if you can see this, maybe you can't. But anyway, 9 years of survey research. This is a new approach to the segmentation of the American people, less focused on demographics and more flexible to reflect a world that changes quite rapidly. These are new categories which we allowed the respondents to develop themselves. We were not a bunch of consultants sitting around a table saying, hey, we've got an hypothesis. Here are some questions we want to ask, and now let's see if they're validated or not. Rather, we began the process 9 years ago, surveying 4,000 Americans with 21 open-ended questions. What is the motto that speaks to your life? What are the two most defining moments that have happened in your life? What are the two major characteristics upon which you decide how to choose your friends, who you will associate with? Which brand speaks to you and why? Who is that brand? What are your aspirations? What is it not that you are now, but that you want to be? And ultimately, if you could name your tribe, what name would you give it? 4,000 surveyed Americans, 21 questions. We had sheets of paper. We did it the hard way, on our deck and in our living room and in our basement, and we read all of those comments. And then from there, we started the process of packaging and whittling down and ultimately continuous quantitative surveys to validate certain points. What we discovered is that Americans are reorganizing themselves into communities of shared interests, into what I call neo-tribes. Neo-tribes that are based on similar attributes, common behaviors, and aspirations. We found validation of 11 of these neo-tribes who you will meet in a moment, and a way to capture emerging neo-tribes, because it is a dynamic world. This is the capstone of a forecaster's life. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm not going to say that I have found the answer, because then you would start to worry about me. What I am going to say is that I found a path to how we can understand ourselves better. Now's the time to move beyond demographics, because demographics do not allow us to drill down deeply enough to really understand what motivates people. Who is a millennial? Lindsay Lohan? LeBron James? Chelsea Clinton? Ivanka Trump? Oh, they're all millennials. And what do they share? A lot of publicity. Okay. Tribal analytics allow us to capture the very soul of individuals and their cohorts by allowing them to identify their own tribes. It is a creative, dynamic, and useful approach to finding who people really are. And by that, then, I mean it is a process where we can find who are the next leaders, who are the team players, the problem solvers, who are the individuals to avoid, who are the entrepreneurs, the creatives, who are the loyal employees and followers, who are the people to hire, to recruit, to provide influence over others, who do I want on my jury, and who do I not want? Move over Myers-Briggs. How many are familiar with Myers-Briggs? Okay, nobody. Tribal analytics is more effective and has the data to back it up. We've worked in the development process with Ogilvy and Mather and a cultural marketing firm called the Paco Collective. And what we found was, number one, tribal analytics was a more effective way to determine the core values and marketing than race and ethnicity as a factor. That was very important, because what we discovered working with both of those groups is that it's those especially engaged in cultural marketing, that it's very expensive to create a budget that is Hispanic and Asian and recognizes the various different cultures, when wouldn't it be better if there was a way to find common denominators and go beyond ethnicity as well as go beyond demographics? The tribal analytics was also a more accurate and more cost-effective means than more traditional, simple demographic factors. And it's unique. The uniqueness of tribal analytics is that it segments the population based on self-identified tribes, according to their shared values, life philosophies, and outlooks. This is really important. We didn't create these tribes. They created them themselves. In doing so, it transcends demographics and other category-specific attitudes and behaviors. And lastly, it presents a targeted method for marketing potentially untapped consumers by marketing to various groups who identify themselves with particular goals and preferences and values. So let's meet the neo-tribes. We've got 2 to a screen, I believe. So the first, and incidentally, 11 tribes, because we allowed people to identify 2 tribes per person, these are going to add up to more than 100%. So there's the God Squad. I'm not going to go through every single one because you have to buy the book. I'm going to talk about some books that I think you should read, but mine is the book that I want you to buy. Okay. All right. Life mission: to live for and serve God by faith. Factors in choosing fellow tribe members: love of God, faith, authenticity, duty, responsibility. The definition of success: happiness, simplicity, no frills. The one thing missing to complete life: find a cure for cancer. And what strengthens their tribal bonds? Attending a place of worship, a spiritual retreat, family, school events. Right next to them, 23.5%, the go with the flow, very Zen-like. They seek balance. What I loved about this group is that they are the only ones where 50% were men and 50% were women, because they seek balance in all they do. And you're welcome to laugh right now. For the TV cameras, please. Their life mission: to strive for balance, moderation, Zen. Factors in choosing fellow tribe members: people with moderation and balance. Their definition of success: achieving the middle of the road. There's little passion. One thing missing to complete life: to live within their means and to stay in the middle of the pack. And what strengthens tribal bonds? Local sporting events. There's a lot here that I'm going to explain. Happy hedonists, one of my favorites. Only 11%. They cut across all demographics. They're young and old, north, south, east, and west. Life mission, seek and have fun, live adventurously. Factors in choosing fellow tribe members, people who want as much fun as they can get. Definition of success, living one's dream. Life in the fast lane, as much carefree fun as possible. One thing missing to complete life, become a movie star. And strengthening tribal bonds, group vacations, local sports events, music festivals, participating in an online chat, or sharing a picture on Facebook. That's pretty sobering, isn't it? This is a group that amazed me. Right from the very beginning, the persistence. In all those sheets of paper and the number of papers that went into the pile where we asked the question, what are the two most defining moments in your life? The people that said some sort of horrible personal tragedy. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a limb, a terrible accident, a horrible divorce. I was amazed, though, that's 1 in 5 Americans. Their life mission to persevere over life's struggles and adversity. Factors in choosing fellow tribe members, those who can understand, those who deal with struggles. Definition of success, survival. Survival. One thing missing to complete life, become a selfless missionary. Those of you who are in the world of not-for-profits, and especially those of you who do charitable nonprofits, will tell you who are your biggest supporters. Those who understand. Strengthening tribal bonds, a group vacation, and school events. I mentioned in the book The Self-Perfectionists, 8.3%, and I mentioned these are the people you don't want to invite to your house for a dinner party and canasta afterward. Their life mission and meaning, to be authentic and genuine. Factors in choosing fellow tribe members, sticking closely to family and loved ones. Definition of success, to be contrarian and above the crowd. Do not look at your neighbor right now. One thing missing to complete your life, writing the great American novel. And lastly, strengthening tribal bonds, being alone, even with others. Real quick, the adventurists, 12%. Across the highways and byways, seeking kicks at every turn, their life mission. Factors in choosing fellow tribe members, adventuresome, optimists, fun seekers. Definition of success, a Beverly Hills mansion or a New York City penthouse. One thing missing to complete life, becoming a movie star, a billionaire, a great inventor, a life of meaning and freedom to pursue passion. Strengthening tribal bonds, group vacations, dinner parties, musical festivals, shopping for clothes. They are different substantially from the happy hedonists. Land of the free, 33%. This is a group that Washington, D.C. does not understand, period. Life mission, duty and responsibility, simplicity, no frills. I will say that the median age is older, but this is not an old group by any stretch. It includes young and younger people. Factors in choosing tribe members, those who live authentically and have a sense of duty and responsibility. Definition of success, live free or die. Patriotism. One thing missing to complete life, find a cure for cancer. And strengthening tribal bonds, attend a place of worship, a group vacation, or a school event. Right next to them, one of the most interesting groups of all, One True Path, tend on the younger side, tend on the conservative side, though they voted for Barack Obama twice. They identify themselves as religious conservatives, but they tell their rabbis, their ministers, their priests, we don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. We want to talk instead about poverty in our community. We want to talk about global problems. Life's mission, authenticity, duty, family. Factors in choosing tribe members, authenticity, perseverance against life's struggles. Faith in God. Definition of success, to be the smartest person in the room. One thing missing to complete life, to become a president or CEO, and they are bonded through places of worship and yet at music festivals as well. The outsiders, we all went to college with outsiders. They're the ones down at the end of the hall who are playing cards in the dormitory all the time, and then mysteriously they're not there the next semester. Life mission, to be an individualist. They seek authenticity from others. Their definition of success, a great artist or inventor. They want one thing missing, to live in a castle in Europe. What strengthens tribal bonds? Being alone. I call this group, these are the Lenny Bruces, the Richard Pryors. These are the hoop dreamers of American comedy. They never quite get there, but everything is funny and they are sarcastic all the time. They don't fit, and yet they're 6%. The Dutifuls, another conservative group, and finally the Creators, 14.5%. They're rebellious, they seek honesty, adventure, optimism. Their definition of success, freedom to pursue their own passions, be their own person, define their own success. They want to write the great American novel, star in a movie, and group vacations and spiritual retreats. But here's, I think, where it gets really interesting. Because take this group, the go with the flow. The go with the flow seek balance. Their politics are moderate. And yet, when we asked who is your second tribe, they intersected mostly with the land of the free, who are a very conservative, let's say, anti-government libertarian group. 15% of the go with the flow said the Dutifuls, who are very conservative. They're the kind of folks who you'll never find parking in the handicap zone. I'm only going to be 15 minutes. They don't break the rules. But lastly, 13% identified secondly with happy hedonists. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that's not only counterintuitive, but after speaking sequentially to 8,600 people, 1,000, 2,000 at a time, these categories maintain themselves that way. And when we continued to poll then with follow-up questions, what we discovered is that it all did make sense after all. Look at the happy hedonists. Happy hedonists obviously are going to intersect with the adventurists, but 13% intersected with the God Squad. What keeps you up at night? The happy hedonists said global warming, the end of our planet. The God Squad said man's stewardship of God's earth. If that isn't a common denominator, I don't know. And it's the smart political strategist. It's the smart marketer. It's the great communicator who's going to find a way to build that bridge. And there are bridges, the tribal border crossings, and so on. Here are shared attributes. The go with the flow, shared, being a work in progress and being open-minded with happy hedonists, persistents, and creators. The happy hedonists shared being open-minded with the go with the flow, but also with the dutiful in the land of the free. And the happy hedonists vote Democrat overwhelmingly. And were more likely to were less likely to identify themselves as conservative or Republican from any other tribe. And here they are sharing these attributes more than any other group, the land of the free and the dutiful. Here's the land of the free. Their attribute is freedom. Who do they share it with most? Happy hedonists, liberal. Creators, liberal. Adventurists, liberal. This is a book I think everybody should read. I had the pleasure, the honor of meeting Theodore Zeldin several years ago. Has anyone ever heard of the book, An Intimate History of Humanity? Wow. It's 12 vignettes, and each begins with an italicized story of a fictional woman who has experienced jealousy, rage, poverty, any one of a number of problems. And then Zeldin, who's a French historian, goes on then to trace those emotions and goes back to the Persians, the Greeks, the Egyptians, down through the Middle Ages, what we know about Africans. And the sum total of the intimate history of humanity is that each one of us is the product of every human and every culture that ever existed on this planet. There's really very little that's new about us and how we feel. The value in understanding the border crossings that I just pointed out is in the development of our skills in the art of communications, marketing, and leadership. There's a path out of this. And this is a quagmire right now. And what is this? Our politics. It's also our marketing, and it's also so much else. But for this group, it is our politics. We have been on this wrong way path of division. It's not unlike what Robert Berkeley wrote about Africa. The graves are not yet full. And he wrote about several African countries and said, none of these tribal wars are natural. They've been over for years. It is leaders, corrupt leaders, even the reformers who become corrupt when they become leaders, who aggravate and exacerbate these tribal wars to keep themselves in power. And essentially, that is what's happened to our two-party system. And the way out of it is building a majority coalition on the basis of not demographics and not regions and not splintering and factionalizing, certainly not by hard ideology. It's by finding those common denominators, even if it's temporary coalitions. That's what politics used to be about anyway. So tribal border crossings. We asked, among other questions, many other questions, is God the creator, the omniscient, the all-powerful, or is God the watchmaker? who winds the watch and then lets it go. Across the board, I mean, the go with the flow, 50 to 20, the watchmaker. Happy hedonists, 48 to 28. I'm sorry, the creator. Go with the flow, or the creator. The God Squad, 81 to 11, the creator. The self-perfectionists, 54 to 28. Across the board, it was creator over watchmaker. This is something that we have to recognize. This is where the American people are at. Whether they're liberal or not, this is how they identify God, as more of a creator than a watchmaker. Is marriage, and the question is longer, of course, solely between a man and a woman? Or is it, I put here in the table here, gay marriage, but beyond just simply a male and female. And while you have shifting majorities, what's very important is that there's still 1 in 5 of the God Squad who recognize gay marriage. All the others are very close. One politician would say, I'm going to find my base and aggravate that group and get them enraged. Another politician would say, there's some openness here, and maybe the best thing is to finesse this issue and let's start talking about something else. So real-world applications. In healthcare, if a physician knows that someone is a member of the God Squad, as opposed to a happy hedonist, there are different ways and different languages and different approaches. It has serious implications for insurance companies, for medical practitioners, public health officers, and providers. What are the habits and lifestyles that expose patients to risks of diseases? A dutiful is far different than an adventurer. How can these be altered? Does a happy hedonist want to play too hard? Does a persistent have the moral fortitude to survive? Does a particular outsider who doesn't trust anybody, or a dutiful who reveres all authority and is willing to take her medicine and advice, how do you treat them? I'm sure differently. Do these folks warrant a completely different and unique approach? Jury selection. Tribal loyalties are very important. You've watched enough TV, I'm sure, to recognize that, a good defense attorney wants one juror that it would take to not get a conviction. And what they do is they try to psych out who that one juror would be. But what they also look for, who are the persuaders, the influencers, who are the persuadables? What are their tribal loyalties? What are their preconceived biases? These can be told by just asking a very few questions among prospective jurors. Can a go with the flow be the leader prototype that attorneys are looking for? Is a land of the free ready to convict a defendant on the first day? Will a member of the God Squad accept a plaintiff who has led an immoral life? Higher ed. Higher ed collects more data than any other institution on earth, and probably knows less about what to do with that data than any other institution on earth. Is it best to pair students in dormitories or social groups according to demographic characteristics, or on the basis of tribal membership and perhaps tribal border crossings? Same holds true with understanding faculty. Is salary the top concern, or is it the ability to travel, to be free to research, or an opportunity to lead in the field? Colleges and university presidents must provide strategic direction, broader trend analysis, the language of change. Teachers and counselors will also benefit from knowing if a student tends to be a self-perfectionist or is goal-oriented but not necessarily likable. Career paths. We always hear there are lots of jobs but not enough people to fill them. Is it because we don't understand that one thing is a CV, But new jobs require characteristics like sensitivity, empathy, as Daniel Pink points out, the ability to interact with similar-minded and different kinds of people electronically and over long distances. Who are more inclined to fit in certain kinds of jobs or gigs as members of tribes or sharing borders with other tribes? Not-for-profits. I mean, the message today is, instead of getting 35 people to give $1 million, you want 1 million people to give you $35. What are the messages? For the God Squad, it's promoting God's will. For One True Path, it's a moral imperative and compassion. For happy hedonists, it may very well be that it's the cool thing to do, especially if it's done with friends. For the persistents, it's a matter of recognizing that others have had to suffer and be redeemed. It's vital to find the tribal model and messages that fit, because charities just no longer survive on worn-out lists of major donors and anemic endowments. Retail marketing and advertising, let's get right to the core here. Politics, coalition building, creating a governing majority, generating consensus. God, how old-fashioned that all sounds. Finding common denominators instead of micro-targeting and hyper-partisanship. I mean, there was a wonderful book that came out, Alan Ehrenholt. This is a long time ago. The United States of Governing. A long time ago. It was about the Carter presidency and then about other politicians who knew how to get elected but couldn't quite govern. And it said, it's one thing to be able to appeal to people, on a one-on-one basis, but it's a whole other thing to be able to govern and to build majorities, a majority coalition, if not permanently, then around specific issues. That's the way it used to be. The master of all masters was Lyndon Johnson. Ronald Reagan wasn't so bad either, but Lyndon Johnson, whether it was by putting that very large head in front of Southern congressmen and just threatening them in every way, shape, or form, or doing horse trading, or calling upon his dead predecessor, or whatever it was, Johnson knew what he wanted, knew how to get it done, and knew how to build a coalition and take advantage of the moment. I'm afraid that some folks know how to get elected, but have lost the art of then knowing what on earth to do once they got there. So finally, moving forward, real analytics requires the sensibility of the artist, the ability to understand people of the social scientist, and the interpretive skills of the novelist, the philosopher, and the poet. I said that. Thank you very, very much. And I'm happy, you can applaud, and then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you think this breakout of neo-tribism would be applicable back in 1776 or going back in history in the U.S.? And secondly, how would it apply, do you think, to maybe some other countries?
Okay, on one hand, the model would certainly be applicable because I think we've always had tribes but didn't understand them. I think what makes them more applicable to today is technology. And the fact that we have such a broader reach, we transcend geography and we transcend time. So we're able to be in touch with people all over the place. So my network is no longer my family, my village, my region, or whatever. And then the second part of the question? Other countries as well. We're going to begin to apply these to other countries as well. I'm certain that they're applicable everywhere. Yes, for the same reason, social media and so on. Yes?
Over your decades of this kind of work, what challenges and opportunities has social media provided to you?
Well, you know, in terms of opportunities, it's so inexpensive, you know, and it's pervasive, and, you know, we're running to catch up with it. Obviously, there's a lot of garbage, but then, you know, when you used to rely on a very heavy television buy, you were also sending garbage to lots of people who were not watching television or not paying attention, you know? And so it's still being sorted out. You know, so the challenges then are cutting through all of the noise. You know, there are people who think they're stars, you know, because they have a blog and they have 26 friends. So there is all that, but I don't think there's any question about the fact that it's flattened the earth for us.
Thank you.
Sure.
You've sliced and diced Americans. I think this is a very interesting presentation. I'm anxious to get some more details, but I'm yearning for what you think are sort of the cross-cutting issues that unite Americans. So that's sort of one question. And the other, looking at maybe the same point from a lower level perspective, if you're trying to manufacture a candidate based on what you found, what are the things that that candidate needs to say that he or she is for to be able to get together 270 electoral votes?
Well, those are really good. Is the car running outside? So what unites us? Family, you know, putting food on the table, a distrust for government, and yet an understanding that government can do good things and it does exist. It's, you know, it's just finding that sort of balance among those issues. But clearly, you know, there was a message out there, obviously in this past election, that was complicated. The same day that Hillary Clinton got 48% of the vote to Donald Trump's 46, 54% in the exit polls gave Barack Obama a positive job approval rating. And the two polls that were taken, one 3 weeks before and one about 10 days before the election, had Barack Obama beating Donald Trump by 11 to 13 points. And so, go figure. Obviously, it's going to come down to personalities, you know, and in the case of Hillary Clinton, you know, not enough Americans in key battleground states liked or trusted Hillary Clinton enough. But with that all said, there has to be a bonding with the leader. There has to be a sense that this person is likable, understands me, is willing to represent me. And for some reason, this time around, either it was a rejection of Hillary Clinton or the right kind of angry message for Donald Trump. I think that was very complicated. But still, with that said, I think ultimately it came down to factors of trust and distrust. Who did they distrust more? Now, you know, to end that, how does somebody win in the future? Well, I think the 2008 message of Barack Obama, you know, of hope, you know, and a vision for the future, that's the sort of thing that folks are looking for. I'm cognizant of the fact that the oldest millennials will be in their early 40s by the 2020 election and will represent at least 40% of the vote by 2020. And that millennials, you know, not to paint this broad paint stroke, but millennials generally are distrustful of current institutions and want to see a vision and a path for a better future, including technology. And so for starters, I'm going to suggest that the next presidential candidate not be, and I will be one that next time around, not be a septa or octogenarian, you know, but maybe a bit younger and a bit more vibrant.
So my question's about whether you can try to perhaps flesh out what might be sort of the causal mechanisms. And what I mean by this is, let's say that if you are providing a typology that's providing characteristics of different, whether it be demographics or just social groups, et cetera, that's fair enough. But if actually there's a dynamic process involved from let's just say from an individual's perspective, the developmental aspects, and you can measure this or look at it from different ways. For example, the kid from a small town in Iowa who, for whatever reason, ends up at NYU for college and then develops different social values, or Facebook. You know, it's said in terms of social capital that, you know, the pundits get it wrong. It's not measuring the number of friends you have or posts, et cetera, that it's used actually to reinforce existing social capital, which is defined, you know, using, let's just say, Robert Putnam's terms of institutional capital that is facilitated from a spatial context or institutional or shared experience, so that, in other words, that some people, I suppose, are out there and they're just adding friends, but it doesn't really count. It's actually the change in society is that the technology allowed people to reinforce existing social capital. So we have Putnam, just to close this, but to frame the question, you know, Robert Putnam, for example, or Jane Jacobs with social capital, what are the dynamic processes that led to the formation of social capital on one hand, and you can have policy responses on the other hand, like in European spatial policy, where you mix different income groups intentionally that supposedly can have a positive developmental effect.
Okay, that's a very good question. And look, just like us, tribal analytics is a dynamism. It used to be when we segmented the public into clusters, because it was such an expensive process, and because things did not move so quickly, you know, the various segmentations lasted for a decade or 2 decades, and they were good. Today, those segments are ephemeral, just like so many things in our society. And so that's why we've baked into the process, you know, an understanding that there are going to be emerging tribes and fading tribes. So what I related to you right now is the now. And it's been the now for a few years. A snapshot, yeah. And I think a snapshot with some legs to it for a while, but we'll be able to capture changes. Now, what pushes people's buttons is the other part of your question. And that's the sort of thing that you can only capture with further snapshots. So that's why this is not a permanent piece of work. This is a skeletal framework, which requires more work and more work and more work over time. And then it also leads to another part of your question, if I understood it all correctly. What are campaigns all about? It's finding that right message at that right moment that tweaks that right value. You know, one of the things I've known for years is that there is a big intersection between the majority of people in this country who will tell you that destroying a fetus is tantamount to manslaughter, 57%, and the 57% who will tell you that a woman has a right to choose. There is an intersection there. What wins? It all depends who the candidate is, what the campaign is, who tweaks out in those two competing values, who tweaks out the message of one over the other at any given moment or time. And that's, you know, I've tried in many ways to simplify here, but we are never going to be simple people.
Yeah, hi, my name is Bill Outlaw, and I'm a former journalist and also worked on several presidential campaigns and with pollsters and people doing focus groups and the like. First, just a quick observation. Well, I work also at federal agencies, and a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on what you referred to earlier, types of evidence-based approach. Yet, from my observation, everywhere I've been, there's an evidence-based approach. They forget the qualitative part of that. And so therefore, they come up with this evidence they don't know what to do with, as I think you kind of alluded to. But second, my bigger question, in being involved in campaigns, and as noticed the trend over presidential campaigns in the winters, there's a big change, as you mentioned, with Obama, but also with others, of hope and change. They come in on a platform of hope and change, and they get here, and then they get absorbed by the system. And then if you go out into the hinterlands, you find people saying, I want the governments, the two parties, to work together. And then you get into Washington, and you find that they're completely polarized. Is there a way that can be bridged? You alluded to bridges, but there, in terms of getting to that point, because there are indications that there is a strong support. I think some of your groups there pointed to the idea of being, of bridging to get that. And by the way, I want to start my own tribe too. By the way, so.
Do you have a name for it?
Yeah, the Outlaw Tribe. That's my last name.
There's always been this disconnect, between the Beltway and outside the Beltway. It's particularly acute right now because the outside the Beltway has so much access to information and so much frustration, and everything is breaking news. Breaking news. I love CNN. Wolf Blitzer comes on and says, I have breaking news, and the panel will be right back to discuss what the breaking news is all about. I don't want to hear from the panel. What's the breaking news? And that really is seldom breaking. But the point is that we have that access to an awful lot of information, and a lot of it is filtered. And for the most part, there are people clearly who are ideological. There are people who are revved up. There's Fox News, and there's Breitbart, and there's MSNBC and Huffington Post, and there are those Daily Kos, all that segmentation. But most people are just simply trying to live paycheck to paycheck. And I do mean it. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck, trying to get the kids to school on time, have enough for school lunches, and don't have time to pay attention to all of that stuff, It's going to take some real courage, but it's also going to have to take courage on the congressional level as well. And that's, I think, where the system is just pre-baked, sadly.
Thank you for joining us for World Affairs Today, a production of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Stay connected with us at www.worldaffairstoday.org.